Hi, yes, I'm Vicky. I'm the founder and creative director of CreativeHutch. And yes, we like to make things all inclusive and accessible. So really pleased that there's so many of you on here today.
Definitely. And looking at the attendee list, it looks like we've got lots of marketing managers and marketing officers and business owners as well. So we'll make sure to tone it at the right level. We're not going to go too into depth in terms of like specialism. We're going to keep it quite high level so you get an overview of everything accessibility that you need to know. We've got around about 2.5 hours this morning. We'll have a break at about 11:45, but there's lots to cram in. But at the same time, please make sure to use the chat function or to raise your hand if you've got any questions, and we'll answer questions as we go rather than leaving it all to the end at a Q&A. I want to make it as interactive as possible, so we're going to be testing out a few accessibility tools. So if you're feeling brave and want to have your website quickly audited in front of 20 or so marketers, that'd be really appreciated. We have picked on someone, as if no one puts a hand up, but you're not going to find out who it is until later. So without further ado, I'm going to share my screen and let's get started with the presentation. There we go. So can everyone see that okay?
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Yep.
Super. Thank you for that. So today we're going to be looking, as I say, we're not going to go too into depth about things. We're going to keep it top level to help give you an understanding of all the key accessibility areas. So to start off, we're going to talk about what accessibility actually covers. We're going to look at the landscape. So in terms of the opportunity for your businesses in taking accessibility seriously. It's not just about being inclusive and morally right. There's also a huge business opportunity in terms of profitability. So 2 reasons to be accessible. We're going to have a quick look at the new legislation, which is coming in June. We're going to look at how accessibility impacts marketing and design, your branding, your colors, all the different marketing channels that you've got, whether that's social or emails. And a key part, especially in line with the new legislation, is all about websites. So how to make sure that your website is fully accessible and in line with the new legislation. We want to try and keep it practical today. So we're going to avoid theory, and it's more going to be about giving you practical tips to use on your own website so you can get started today. So moving on, as I said, we want to keep the session interactive. Please use the chat function if you've got any questions. I'm just going to double check the chat, see if we've had any questions. Nice to see people are using it already. And yes, we've got lots to get through in the next 2 hours. So make sure you've got your coffees ready and strap in because we're going to cover a lot. So without further ado, Vicky, if you'd like to share a little bit more about your experience and your role at CreativeHutch.
Yeah, morning again. As I said, I do the creative strategy at CreativeHutch, which isn't just about branding, it's all about messaging and the tone of voice and who you're speaking to and how, which is really important when it comes to accessibility. And for me, just to make sure that your brand is inclusive to everyone, which widens your audience, which we'll talk about today, and also just makes it makes sure that you have growth and longevity in your brand as well. It's really important. So that's something that I'm going to talk through today within your branding. Yeah.
Lovely. I'm Nicola. I am Senior UX and UI Designer at CreativeHutch, and I focus on everything website related. So everything from content to design, structure, SEO, and of course accessibility, which involves a lot more than what you think it might in terms of website design. So we'll be covering a lot of those points today and giving you some good advice in terms of what you can do to keep your website accessible and inclusive for wider audiences.
Absolutely. And lots of you know me already. I'm Dan McCauley. I'm the marketing manager at CreativeHutch. I'm a bit of a marketing generalist. So as I've worked with many of you before. I've had a little taste of all different types of areas. So accessibility runs through all the different areas, which we'll touch on today. I currently manage the marketing for CreativeHutch, and as well as support our clients with like marketing strategy, social media management, with a lovely team of obviously Nick, and we've got Carol and Harriet as well. So if you need marketing support, you know where to find us. So moving on, what is accessibility? So at this point, I'd like to open the floor a little bit and ask you guys, what do you understand by the word accessibility? Have you come across it before? Is it something that you already consider within your business? If you want to raise your hand or pop it in the chat, it'll be interesting to know what you understand by that term. It's quite a catch-all term, but it'll be interesting to hear what your thoughts are. Anyone feeling brave? I'm gonna have to pick on someone. Is Mia typing in the chat? Is she gonna save us?
Nick, good morning to you.
Morning.
I'll kick off. My name's Ollie. I run a new social enterprise called Access for You. I'm a wheelchair user, and we carry out access audits and deliver equality training and inclusion support to organisations from across the sectors. Accessibility, it's a big broad term, isn't it? Accessibility is about ensuring that people from disabled people, from people with who are from the ethnic minority community, etc., are able to access organisations, support businesses, online marketing, websites, etc. Accessibility is about ensuring that you're meeting individual needs, equity through the Equality Act 2010. In a nutshell.
Exactly that. You should be sitting on this side of the presenting screen, I think. Yeah, thank you very much for that, Ollie. And it's interesting seeing in the chat as well how people are talking about the ability of everyone to be able to use it. So it's not just people with disabilities or visual impairments, it's about accessibility for everyone and being inclusive. And often it's a balancing act of your target audience and making sure that everyone is able to access exactly like in the chat, accessing information and accessing your business. And there's a huge, obviously you don't want to exclude anyone from entering your business. And that's online and in person as well. Have you got anything to add to that, Nick or Vicky? Is there anything in terms of accessibility?
I think I liked what Ollie said, which is true. It's the equality, regardless of whether you do have a specific physical disability or a neurodivergent challenge. Even if you're just friends and family, it just means it's inclusive and you're not, putting a barrier up for anyone, and you're making sure that people feel heard and seen, which I think is more of the ethical or, human part of it, as opposed to the legal elements that we might be going through later today.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Very true.
Now, just to give a bit of a flavour, there's a really great video. So I'm going to quit sharing the PowerPoint and I'm going to share this video with you. If there's any issues with the sound, please let us know. But this will be really interesting to show you an example of how accessibility can work in practice and how it can be for users with additional needs to access information. So it can help put you in the shoes of someone accessing your website. So without further ado, I'm going to share this. Swap the mics over. Can people hear that okay?
No, I can't hear anything, Dan.
No.
Mm-hmm.
I think what I'll do, I'll just pop the link in the chat, and if everyone would like to just take 5 minutes to watch that video, it's really, really useful to see how it is. So yes, if you'd like to watch that video, and then we'll reconvene in about 4.5 minutes. Super. Okay, so just another 30 seconds or so before we get back into things. Excellent. So thank you for taking the time to watch that. It's really interesting in terms of putting yourself in the shoes of someone that uses a screen reader. So that's a key part of accessibility, and you can see how machines interpret the content that you put online. So as we move on, we can see the scale of the accessibility challenge and the opportunities. So when we look at some of the stats here that we've pulled out, especially with retail businesses, like abandoned carts cost the economy an absolutely huge number. 80% of people with additional needs struggle to use websites that aren't optimized, which is a huge issue. You see loads of websites that aren't accessible, and up to 56% of people are willing to pay more. And when there's a few more stats that are found in addition to those on the screen about brand loyalty and things like that, how people are more trusting of brands that are accessible, they're more likely to be loyal to brands that are accessible. And if you can imagine, for example, the airline tickets video that we've just watched, if there's one airline that is accessible, you're going to immediately go to them, and then that'll build loyalty, and it's a snowball effect. So in addition to the moral and ethical parts, there's definitely a big profitability aspect of accessibility too. In terms of the scale of the challenge, around in the UK, around 1 in 5 people have some kind of disability, whether that's visible or invisible, and around 1 in 10 have a visual impairment. So if you can imagine, if you were a shop on the high street, if you were to shut your doors to every 1 in 5 customers that walked by, or 1 in 10 with a visual impairment, you'd go out of business. So digitally, this is also something you really need to consider. So moving on, the EEA is a new legislation which is coming in June, and Nick is the resident expert, if you'd like to take over this section.
So the European Accessibility Act is a directive aimed at improving digital accessibility across the EU, and it comes into effect in June 2025 and applies to a wide range of digital services, including e-commerce, banking and digital communication. So actually, a lot of what's coming into effect are being tweaked in June 2025 has actually been in place since 2018. So a lot of the kind of the things that will be checked and looked for is already in place. So actually, although it seems like a huge undertaking, a lot of it is already existing within the Act. So it's kind of not as big a task. I think it frightens a lot of people that there's this, this big deadline, but actually it's a case of tweaking what's there rather than it being a complete overhaul of what's coming. So not to worry too much about it, but take it seriously enough. So the key areas that will be covered by the EAA will be websites and mobile apps, digital documents, e-commerce platforms, and customer service and online support, which you would think would already be accessible to most, if not all people, but that's just not the case at the moment.
Absolutely. And in addition to websites and mobile apps, like you mentioned there, Nick, when we look at how else it impacts marketing design, as well as the legislation, it also impacts the user experience, whether people have got additional needs or not. Having a well-optimized website using, which we'll touch on later, around like heading tags and things like that, just makes it more better experience for everyone. In terms of SEO, website crawlers are more, it's easier for them to crawl your website, so you get a boost on SEO. Looking at legal compliance, obviously with the new legislation, and brand reputation and brand loyalty, exactly like the airline video that we just shared. And as well, having accessible communications means that more people understand your marketing messages. So when we're spending money, when we're doing things on social, when we're doing everything we can to get the word out about our businesses, if we do it in an accessible way, it benefits everyone in terms of understanding that message. So now we know the scale of the challenge. Here is what we do about it. So we're going to be handing over to Vicky as we start off with the key part, which is branding, and it's the first part in any accessibility audit. After you, Vicky.
Thank you. That was a great video, Dan, and it was quite interesting how I was getting really frustrated for him. You know, and you don't think about that when you're putting things online, or when you're doing items, not just that, you know, you're not being able to access anything, but it's quite frustrating and it must make you feel really angry. So that was a great video. Thanks for that. So just while we're on this screen, the reason I'm here, because the legislation is all digital. But as Dan said, everything should start with brand and brand foundations. So that's not just how you look. So, you know, it's not just the colours and the typography, which is important, but also, you know, as the title says of the workshop, how can we be authentic and accessible at the same time? Because that's what people really engage with. And that's how you build the trust as well. Because if people see, for example, with the last decade of sustainability and environmental issues, greenwashing, all businesses have gone, well, we're sustainable. And if you look down their supply chain, they're actually not. So it's just looking at how we can ensure that what we're doing here is not just for legal compliance, which is obviously really important, but is also, you know, authentic and true for the business and really will mean something to your clients and customers going down the line. So I really want to talk about how taking accessibility into your brand and making it more user or human focused, however you want to say that, will really make sure that, you know, you've got that authentic care for your customers and your employees. So why does it matter within design and not just on the website? So as we've talked about today is accessibility, which means, you know, as everyone has put in the chat, the people that come across your brand and your products or your services can do so without the limitations or barriers, so they don't feel excluded or frustrated, as we all felt when we watched that man the gentleman in the video. So what else does that include? What else is wrapped up in that accessibility? So you've got inclusivity, which we've talked about. So it ensures everyone can access your business, you know, your messaging, your design, regardless of any ability or background. So it could be physical, it could be neurodivergent, it could be, you know, just as some of us are getting older, you know, it's just all walks of life. So it means it's inclusive for everyone. And then that usability, which Nick will talk about further, but it's making interaction simpler and more intuitive for everyone. And that doesn't just mean online. So the reason I want to talk about brand first is because it's the whole experience and the touch points that everybody has with your business. So, you know, as Dan said, if you're a retail shop, and as soon as someone walks through the door, it needs to have that same inclusive, warm, welcome feeling that it has online. Picking up the phone, any type of touch point that someone has with your brand or business should be really consistent, especially when it comes to accessibility. And the next one is equality. Again, we've touched on that before when Ollie was making his point. So it's providing the same opportunities and experiences for everybody, again, regardless of demographic background, challenges. So equality is really key here. And the really important thing that it can do is drive innovation, drive that growth. It can really benefit not just the wider audience that we're talking about, but your business as well. Sometimes, you know, when we're working through this and you look at those little small tweaks that we need to make for your brand and your business, a new product might come out of this, or a new idea or a new service. So it can really drive innovation forward when you're trying to include everybody that's relevant for your business. So just go on to the next slide, where we've got a favourite Venn diagram that we like, where I've taken the key points, which is accessibility, inclusivity and usability here. And the kind of red circle in the middle and the little white circle, that's the sweet spot that we want to hit within the brand and the products. So you've got inclusive design, so that's across everything, as we've said, offline, your marketing materials offline, posters, whatever you want that to be, in person, on the phone, to online, which Dan and Nick will talk about shortly. But then inclusive visual design, which is what we're going to talk about today, because there's so many different challenges, disabilities, things like that. And later on, I'll show you a website that you can go to look at those and to see how if you have a specific demographic, how you can really cater to them and help them feel included. But visual design is something that we're going to talk through in a little bit more detail today. So going on to the next slide, what does that mean? So the accessibility point doesn't just mean helping people who cannot see at all. So you've got colour vision deficiency, which people also call colour blindness. And that could be anything from not being able to see your blues and your greens, which I think the majority of the male demographic have issues with, to, total visual impairment, like the gentleman in the video that we saw, to cognitive impairments, which means, things like Alzheimer's, trouble remembering, a stroke, something that, is developmental, as opposed to the neurodivergent, which is ADHD, dyslexia and autism, which is very, very common. It's not on the peripheral of society. It's very common in everyday life. So these are the accessibility elements that we're going to talk through today. And just talking about audience, if we pop onto the next slide, is that if you think about, again, you've got that shop door and every 1 in 10, 1 in 5 even, you close the door and say, sorry, you can't come in. That's what we're doing, because 350 million people around the world have colour vision deficiency. That's not including all the other elements of the spectrum that we've just talked about. So that's 5 times total of the UK. So it's 5 UKs that we're closing the doors on and not speaking to. And that's 1 in 12 men and 1 in 200 women. So again, you can start to see the numbers of people that we're excluding when we're not really thinking about how we can talk to them, how we can make things easy for them to access information. Again, if you're a retail e-commerce website. So again, as we're saying here, these aren't just edge cases, they're everyday experiences for everyone. So if you're not thinking about all these different types of people and how you can engage them, then, it could even be friends and families and colleagues of people who advocate or assist the people that they're helping, caring for, or, just love and want to feel included. So again, this just gives you a really good grasp of how you could grow your business, but also really include some great people. And internally for your culture, you could, thinking about hiring people, you could really have a great team if you just open the doors to everybody that you can do, really. So as I said on the next slide, we're not touching every accessibility element today, because that would be just too much. But if you go onto the .gov website, they've got great advice and snapshot guidance here with icons of how you can really engage and speak to people with autism, those who have hard of hearing, with dyslexia, motor disabilities, low vision, of those who use screen readers. The list goes on. So, we can't do everything for everyone, but it's worth making sure you can do the top level element to include people. And then if you do have a specific audience type, then really ensure that you speak to them. So the first thing that everyone thinks of when we're talking about accessibility, especially online, is colour. And we've talked about colour visual impairment in the slides above. So it's not colour just in the sense of here, like blue and yellow, but it's also the tonal contrast. What is the tonal contrast of the content? So an example here, you've got obviously the blue with the red on. This is unreadable to pretty much 99% of the people here. And then a great test for that is to make everything black and white, and it's even more illegible. So this is just obviously a very extreme case, but what we wanted to talk about is if you just tweak the colours, you don't have to change all of your brand colours immediately, but if you tweak for example here, make the background lighter, it's still got the hue of the blue, the same red, but then as soon as you make that black and white, you can still read it. It's got that high tonal contrast. So, as Nick was saying before, we don't want everyone to panic about anything, but if you've got brand recognition in your brand already, it doesn't mean you need to go and reinvent everything. It's just looking at how we can tweak certain elements to ensure that it's really easy for everyone to engage with and understand. And then some of the little tips on the colours. So for example, here, obviously you can see here, all of these fail. They're very hard to read, and they're hard for me as well. So the 99% of the people are hard to read. But again, 2 ways that you can change that is by just tweaking the background of these colours, and then you can see that they pass. And I'll go on to pass and fail shortly and what that means. Or you keep the colours and change the colour of the font. So you know, just really take a moment to look at the colours that you have in your brand, how you put copy on top of that, if you do, and if it's needed. And if you do, then I'm going to show you a little tool shortly that will help you gauge whether that will pass the standards. So there's a AA standard and AAA standard, which we're not going to go into today. It starts getting a bit technical, but we've got a little app that will show you that just makes that easy for you. So you can make sure that all the colours that you use, the size of the fonts that you use is accessible for everybody. So it's not just about colour when we're in this colour element. So colour means a lot as well. So you can see that red immediately always is either warnings or anger, or if you're McDonald's food, but colours do have quite a lot of psychology behind them. But if you want to relay some information really quickly, use icons with them. So as you can see here, you've got the colour, the type, and the icon. So at a glance, you can see what it's trying to say, but also it gives you 3 different options to be able to understand and engage with that piece of content. And then again, when you're doing small messages, you know, don't use too many colours, because again, your eye won't know where to look. Some people won't be able to read some of those colours, and the tonal elements of these colours make it really hard to read. So make sure the information is used a limited selection of colour. So as you can see, that pink smiley face there, the copy is hard to read. But if you have it on white, a darker copy, then again, that's easy to read. And you can always check this through the checker that I'm about to show you. So there's so many of these around. We use Colour Contrast Analyzer, and we use it for everything. So on the right hand side is an example of some brand guide colours that we've recently done for a client. This is their beautiful colour palette, and we've just put all of their colours through a checker. And as you can see, you've got AAA pass and AA pass. We always try and use a AAA pass, so it means that it's accessible for all and people will be able to read it. And then this gives them a guide going forward of how they can use the colours together. And if they do want to have a coloured background for, you know, to engage or to get attention, then they know what colour font they need to use with this colour as well. So there's so many of these that are free, and we'll put some links to these in the checklist that we give you after this workshop. So again, not just talking about colour, the type is really important as well for legibility. So you've got all these different types of fonts. You've got a sans serif, which is the easiest to read, and it can really help with recognition for those less advanced readers, and it has really simple characters in it. So if possible, I would always go for a sans. And if you look at the bottom, these are fonts that are deemed accessible and widely available. They're all free. So as a sans, you've got Tahoma or San or Arial, Verdana, Helvetica. Again, we'll put this in the list for you, but these are all free and accessible, and a lot of them are Google fonts as well, which I'm sure Nick will touch upon. Serif's great as well. Oh, sorry, Dan. And it's great. It's great for fluid readability and advanced readers. So you can use this if you want to. Slab is great if you're going to use these for headings rather than lots of body copy, which I'll talk through in a moment. Script is nice, but where possible, if you can avoid script, that would we would always recommend that. Because, as we've said here, for those with dyslexia or other visual impairments, it might be quite hard to read the font if it's joined together. So going on to the next page, what many people on the websites when we're talking about these new legislations that Nick will talk through is like headings. So it's how people will read your copy. So it's really important to do this in print as well. So the heading here, it's the most important piece of information, and this is how it's going to engage people. Then you've got a subheading, and this is where you want it to be not quite as prominent, but it leads people in. Your body copy, which is preferably always in sans serif, which we've talked about, and then a large pullout. And this is just in the way that people will read and engage your copy. So it's always good to give space around it and really have a proper hierarchy. And then again, this goes online, which Nick will talk about, when you have a reader talking about it. So the reader isn't going to lots of different types of content that makes no sense to the person who's listening to it. And the same goes when you're doing print. So when you're going on to putting copy on imagery, which it'd be preferable to avoid, it can't always be, it's the simple things to do. So here, as you can see, the top layer, we can't read any of that, and the images, it's just a mess. But if you do need to do copy, you can do things like make sure the white instead of red so that it's legible. But you can always extend the background as we have in the middle and have the imagery in the right hand side. And then again, you can make sure that there's a fade or a blur. So if you do have to have imagery underneath your text, really make sure that all of it is legible and it has that hierarchy that we've just talked about. Then we'll skip over to icons. So this is brand language that really helps as well. And there's different types of icons. I've gone for some very simple ideas here, but you can have illustrative ones again, which have more colours. But I would try and shy away from those if possible. Keep to these icons. They're simpler. They really make sure people understand what you're trying to say at a glance. And you have the universal ones, which everyone around the world will know. You've got home, print, search. They're very rare, but these are great for being able to understand immediately what that piece of content is trying to say. Then you've got icons with multiple meanings or icons with the same meaning. And at this point, I would probably try and put some copy of what that means next to it or underneath it. So again, it's having that icon language, but ensuring that the meanings don't get misconstrued. Because some icons are just so ambiguous. So it's really important to just have a little think about your icons as well. So that's top level, just looking at your brand look and feel. How can we make sure it's authentic? And, you know, CreativeHutch, our brand is built on the belief that everyone should feel welcome and respected. And that's what our values are. Our values are to guide and educate, build relationships and inspire. And that's everyone to be as inclusive as possible, both with our knowledge, you know, our culture, our work, our clients. And that goes through everything, the way we talk to everybody, the way we try and have content online to make sure it's accessible for everyone. So I think ensuring that your accessibility runs through your brand values and your vision makes it authentic, and people will trust it. You know, they'll know it's not just a checkbox for compliance. They'll really know that what you're saying actually matters and you want to be as inclusive as possible. So how do you do that? So start with your purpose and values. If you have your brand strategy, just go back and look through that. For example, you know, if your core values have inclusivity or trust or relationships in it, how can you build on that? How can you build on that with that accessibility and make sure that all those touch points are consistent? Connect it to your brand story. So make sure, as I said, it's not just about compliance, but tell that story through it. So make sure it's friendly or supportive or people-centric, and make sure that you truly are supporting as many of your customers and clients as possible. Reflect your brand personality. So it doesn't mean by being accessible you have to strip everything and be black and white and big copy and no imagery. You know, you can really have it on brand, and actually it makes it more fun, more challenging. But just ensure that you've got that sufficient tonal contrast in your colours, so you can still have your brand and your brand personality. It just means that it speaks to more people. Reinforce that consistency, which I say across brand anyway, but that whole experience, that whole journey, not just online because it's a compliant, but everything, every touch point, you know, again, if you've got a physical store, how do people move around in it? How do people get into it? So really make sure it's consistent and tell people, be true and honest to say, you know, I'm not 100% accessible at the moment. I really want to be. My 5-year plan is A, B, and C. The same with sustainability. You know, you don't have to be 100% brilliant and on point. You just need to be aware, inclusive, and make sure that people know that you are on that journey and this is what your goal is. So just a couple of examples of brands that have tweaked their look and feel. So we've got one here, which is just a Welsh brand. It's the quick one I could find. They've used icons for the letters, so nobody can read that. It's very crowded. Strapline underneath, which I can't read because it's Welsh. Well, it's Welsh and English. There's just too much going on, and it'd be really difficult for people to understand. Once they've refreshed it, they've got rid of all the copy. They've cleared it up. They've created a sans font, which is really easy to read, and then an icon which is just saying what they do. It's just a simplified icon which will be recognizable as they build the brand. So a quick example of what we've just done recently, we work with an international company called Invacare, and they do a lot of products for those who have disability challenges from different types of wheelchairs, beds, things like that. Kushal is one of their brands. So come into Kushal, it's a very high-end wheelchair for active wheelchair users. Everything was black when I first came to it with white copy. I couldn't read it. I couldn't see the imagery. It was black wheelchair on black copy. I think I likened it to a 1980s teenage boy's bedroom with the black, white and red. The imagery was closed behind the K. It was very male dominated, even though their audience are male and female. It wasn't accessible at all. So we've just spent the past year with them going through their messaging and their language and how they speak, making it more human orientated. So if we just go on to the next slide, you can see we've still got their look and feel. So again, it's showing you that you don't need to kind of change everything about your brand. You just need small tweaks. So we've kept their red and their, you know, their black, but we've made it a warmer black and a warmer white. We've given more white space around things. We've brought in a font that is uniquely theirs, but it's a sans. We've brought in people to talk about people, to show that it's you know, it's the people are behind the brand, it's not the product. And we've changed the language, so it's not all kind of about drive and performance. It's all about people's lives and how they make the Kushal theirs. So we've really spent a long time understanding the audience and what things mean to them. And we're about to roll this out, but internally it's inspired everyone and made everybody in Kushal really understand what it means, how to speak to their audience, rather, you know, the whole audience, and be really inclusive and create a community and not just sell a product without actually thinking about what that means in everyday life as well. So it's become more of an aspirational brand. And I think that is it from me on the look and feel. If before we have a coffee, does anybody have any questions or comments on the brand side of the accessibility?
And if anyone's unsure about their brand colours, it would be interesting to run a bit of an accessibility check. Maybe that's something we could do during the break, Vicky, if that sounds good. If anyone wants to be brave.
Yeah, and I think Vicky, oh no, yeah, you're welcome, Vicky. It's a lot to take in, and like we said, it's top level, but yes, please do type anything in the chat if you have questions. Thank you.
Excellent. So yeah, if anyone's feeling brave, if they want to pop their hand up or put it in the chat, and we can do a little check of their colour accessibility and maybe give some suggestions on how we could slightly tweak the brand. Yeah, just keeping it interactive and really useful for everyone. So time for a 5-minute coffee. If anyone would like to pop to Leo or make a coffee. Now that we've chatted through brand and given you the foundations of accessibility. Next, we'll move into actually implementing that on your website, using it on socials, making sure that your copy works, and putting really into practice what we've learned so far. So we'll reconvene at 5 to 11, so that's a 7-minute break. So I'll speak to you soon.
And yeah, the Health Collective have just said colour analysis. So could you pop in your website into the chat, and I'll do that while we're all making a cuppa. Thank you.
So just one more minute before we resume the presentation.
Dan, did you see my message? Do you want me to share the screen quickly to go through the colour app when everyone's back?
Great.
Sounds good.
Super. So hopefully everyone's got their refresh teas and coffees. Vicky's going to do a quick run through of the Health Collective's colours. So if you'd like, you're sharing your screen, Vicky. If you'd like to through that, that's how I can kick off the second half of today's session.
Fab, thanks. Okay, welcome back, guys. I am actually going to do 3 quick websites. I know we haven't got that much time, Dan. So as I mentioned earlier when we were going through all the brand elements, that a really handy tool is this colour contrast analyzer. There are many more out there, but this is just the one that we use. And we always show to our clients when we're doing brand guidelines how their colours pass with each other. This looks like a complex grid, but it's just, there's a lot of colour palettes, colours in this client's colour palette. So this is larger than normal, but it just shows the different colours that can work together. And we have the double A, which is minimum standard passing, as you can see here, and triple A. So this is very legible. This is still legible, but maybe less so. So you have the different rates there. So we're going up to the Health Collective first. I think you guys said this is work in progress, a new one. But it's good to say that this actually, from a colour point of view, we've got the cream background. And then if we scroll to the green, which is the colour of the copy, let's go to a page that's got copy on it. You've got the green and the cream. So this actually passes both A and triple A, both with regular size text and the larger text, which we'll go on to later as well. But I actually think the body copy of this is a black, which works great. So actually you pass on all counts. So well done on that. And then just going to go on to Bendrig, who said that they just had a rebrand. It's lovely. The colours are beautiful. So again, this is just from a colour contrast point of view. It's worth using this. You've got really lovely colours, but having a look at how the copy sits and the size of everything, but also the colour, how illegible that is. So we've got the white background and this lovely green font. So that's great. It's on white, it's a dark colour. So again, that passes triple A and double A, both regular and large text. But just looking at now, if you have the green background, sorry, not the green background, pink background and white text. So as you'll see here, it's larger text. So this is great for double A. It does actually pass the large text, but not for regular. And if you wanted it to be triple A, it doesn't actually pass. And that's just because it's hard when you've got all of these different colours. It depends on the visual impairment, but you know, they're really beautiful colours, but it might be worth looking at just the tonal contrast of them a little bit further. You know, as we said, if it's a larger text, it's usually easy to see. Let's just have a look at this. So the blue on the white. Again, I think because of the tone of the blue with the white text, we can read it. We've got it quite large, but for some people it might be a little bit more tricky. So beautiful colour palette, beautiful brand, but just might be worth looking at tweaking the font that you've got on here just to make it more accessible, but it does pass the double A, so that's great. And then just to show you the website that we haven't changed yet, but the branding that we're working on at the moment, very black, very white. So often we use a warm black and a warm white, which is easier on the eye anyway, and it's also just creates a little bit more warmth to the brand rather than being so cold. But what this is why we're rebranding these guys. This looks okay to us, but if we look at the tone of the red, which we've actually changed in the rebrand, against the white, not red on red, because that's definitely won't pass. Again, if it's a large text like Unlimit Your World, but also I'm getting rid of this because it's italic, which is can be quite hard to read as well. This fails. So having white or any type of colour with too much to copy on is probably not advised if possible. Apart from like the buttons and things like that on Benrig, that should be fine, but it's when we start kind of creating more body copy that it can get a little bit harder to read. So it's that simple really. And if we'll link to it after the workshop, but hopefully that helped.
Super, that's really useful. Thank you, Vicky. So the next section, I will share my screen, is all about websites. So Nick, I'll pass over to you.
Thank you.
As we explore a little bit more about websites and more about app accessibility.
Okie dokie. So I think when people think about website and mobile app accessibility, they think kind of mainly about kind of ticking a box and being compliant, as well as, bless you, Vicky. And yeah, there's lots of different things that come into website and mobile app accessibility. But basically what we're talking about is making a website or mobile app accessible to as many people as possible, regardless to what ability, disabilities, additional requirements they need online. It just means that we make the content and the design clear and simple enough so that most people can use it without the need to adapt it in the first place, while supporting those that do need those adaptations. I think, you know, a lot of people might not have a choice when they're having to use a mobile or website service. For example, accessing government services. You know, sometimes, you know, you have to use the online service. You can't always pick up the phone and have somebody help. So I think the more that we can make those services accessible, the better. It works better for everyone, and 9 times out of 10 they're often faster, easier to use, and for that reason appear higher in search engine rankings. So that's kind of a little added bonus for making everything accessible. So some of the common problems that I think we come across with websites is that they're not adaptable for mobile use. So whether that's having a couple of breakpoints, we would say, within your website so that it's accessible on a desktop of any size, a tablet or a mobile, we often find that those are the things that are kind of neglected regularly in terms of your layout adapting to those different devices and sizes, depending on, you know, where you are, whether you're at a desk or you're out and about. People access that content in all different ways. So that's one of the problems we face. There's also things like having your website built in such a way that it means that it can't be navigated using a keyboard. So, you know, particularly when we have people with, you know, mobility problems or things like that, then if you can't navigate through the website using the keyboard, you're missing a lot of the content, as well as people with visual disabilities. So if you think you're sat and you need to use a website and you need your screen reader to be able to read out the content that's on the screen, if your website isn't set up in a way that has headings, body copy, and you're skipping those headings, for example, there's no context to what's being read out, and you might be confused by the way that that content is structured. And that has a big impact on people using screen reader technology. Things like PDF forms as well, for example, can't be read on screen readers. So if you're adding forms to your website and people need to download a PDF, or you even using an interactive PDF, a lot of the time screen readers can't relay that information in a way that makes sense. And even down to things like missing alt text on websites. So if you have an image on your website, the right practice is to include alt text when you upload that photo to the website, which will give a description to the image. So even if somebody can't see the image or have trouble seeing the image, that alt text can be read out on a screen reader, and it can tell you what you should be seeing or what you could be seeing. And it just makes everything a lot more inclusive for everyone online. As we've covered, there's also things like colour contrast and different things that can make... Sorry, I'm just reading a little question there from the Health Collective. How much detail do you go into with alt text? So I would say it doesn't need to be too highly detailed, as long as it gives kind of a general idea of what that image is showing. So visually, but also contextually as well. So that it's kind of like when you use, for example, a stock photo website and you're looking for a photo, what you would type in there is likely most of what you would put in your alt text. So if you're looking for a photo of happy smiley people sitting outside in a park on a summer's day, that would be what you would put in the alt text there. And to take that to another level, which we won't cover much of today, but in terms of SEO as well, you can also include some of your marketing keywords within that alt text to give that image a bit of a boost when it comes to Google search, which, you know, we're all very keen on, aren't we, Dan?
Yeah, and just before you move on, Nick, there was a great example of a client that we've got where they were ranking for image terms for they did beautiful handmade like birthday cards and Christmas cards and all that type of thing. And they were ranking on Google Images for their good use of alt tags. So that was bringing traffic to the website, and they were converting into sales. So as well as alt tags being important for accessibility, on the SEO end, I've seen in real practice that it can actually have business benefits. Mm-hmm. And as I mentioned before about especially like government websites and people not having alternatives, Catherine and Jessica today from the call on Westmoreland Fairness Council, there's even an accessibility officer at the council. And I know when I used to work with you guys, we used to have to run everything through accessibility. And it's such a key, crucial part of accessibility and making sure people can access your services. And now that's being rolled out to private sector businesses like everyone on the call today. So it's really, really crucial. So yeah, just a couple of interesting bits from what you're talking about there, seeing it in practice in real life and seeing how different businesses respond to the challenge, really.
Yeah, and I mean, for me as well, background wise, I graduated from uni in 2007. No, yeah, 2007. And even at that point, what we were looking at in terms of my first job in web design was the .gov accessibility guidelines in terms of making all of our online products accessible and inclusive. So they've kind of held the torch for a long time. And I think what I have noticed with, particularly the Westmoreland website, which I have had a look at, really good use of kind of government guidelines and government service. So yeah, that was good to see.
Excellent. And we've just got a question in the chat there from Mia. Have you got any thoughts on that, Nick? I've got a couple of thoughts, but it'd be interesting to...
Using AI. So with AI, I think one of the things for me at the minute that we see a lot of is sometimes what AI doesn't have is context. So for me, with the alt tag information, it can be quite specific, especially if you're bringing in those keywords, localities, things like that. AI doesn't necessarily bring that information in. Sometimes it does, but I always think you can spot an AI generated piece of copy, an AI generated tag, or search terms suggested by AI. So you've got to be quite careful with it, but if it's working for you, then by all means use it. And I think especially if you have a website that has a lot of images, for example, e-commerce, that's a good one. If you've got hundreds and hundreds of products and product images and you need to create kind of a batch of those a batch of those alt tags that need to go alongside those images, if you can generate that by AI and you can use sort of a spreadsheet to sort through those, then yeah, I think that's great. But I would generally kind of advocate for creating your own, because it's good practice and it allows you to tailor it specifically to you, your website, and the locality and specifics of where you are. What were your thoughts, Dan?
Yeah, definitely. And I think if you're doing bulk alt tags, that's one thing, but the time it would take to write the right prompt for, if you're using like ChatGPT, for example, it's probably easier to just do what you think it looks like. It's always useful to get ideas to get you in a bit of a rhythm, but I know from my experience, it tends to be, just cracking through and writing what you think, and that tends to be much better than AI.
Yeah, and I think, Google can spot a human. So I think, I might be slightly off the mark on that. I'm open to challenge on that. But I think now, because AI services are becoming more and more and more widely used, I think Google will start rewarding those more human elements, because again, it's about that authenticity and that inclusivity in terms of accessibility. So yeah, I think it has its uses, and I think if it can, if you're using a tool that will check to make sure that those alt tags are optimized for things like SEO, then that's great. But yeah, I think it's a use case of kind of in bulk for me. We tend to write ours ourselves, certainly when we're producing customer websites.
Excellent. And just before we move on, Ollie, but the Westmoreland Furnace, that's so I used to work at Eden, which was Westmoreland Furnace's predecessor. We had a web team that was always telling me to get my alt tags right, so I was just paying a homage to Judith, Catherine and Jess, all I know who we're talking about. So yeah, if we'd like to move on, Nick, about how to ensure good accessibility.
So when it comes to online and your mobile apps and things, I think what's most important, first and foremost, content is king. So text readability is about more than kind of your short sentences and things like that. what we're looking at are things like using simple plain language. So we want to steer clear of any kind of regional slang and abbreviations where we can, and providing definitions where there might be any ambiguity when it comes to using certain words and terms, especially kind of in niche industries and areas. I think it's always good practice to make sure that you're speaking to people rather than constantly talking to peers, which it's just good practice more than anything else. So another point would be keyboard friendly navigation and screen readers. So again, I know I mentioned it previous, but it's important that the screen readers are able to at least read your navigation and your top line headings, because that will give context to the content on your website, and it will allow people to process and go through that information in a logical manner. Again, I know I'm repeating myself, but these are important points. Forms and interactive elements that can be read by screen readers. So again, if you're having forms on your website, you're better using an HTML form, something that's built within the website, than having people download and fill out PDFs or Word files or anything of that kind. The technology is there now to make forms kind of more user-friendly and interactive than ever before. So it's the right tool for the right job. Color contrast, again, is important. I know Vicky's demoed kind of how it looks when you use, foreground and background colors, and how that can have an impact. And it can be quite simple to test those things with, you can even download and use extensions in your web browser that will allow you to do that automatically or individually by element, which is what Vicky showed us. So that's something that I would always check, kind of underneath the text readability, ensuring your color contrast is there as well. And one of the most important things that probably gets skirted over quite a lot is semantic HTML. So all that means is that you're using the right elements of HTML for the right job. So this comes into the domain of your developer. So what we tend to find at times is that many people can build a website, but building a website properly and having a website built with accessibility at the forefront is really, really important. So we do find when people are building websites with things like page builders, that 9 times out of 10, there will be issues with the semantic HTML that's used. If your website has as little code as possible and that code is used well, your website's more likely to be accessible than it is if you use kind of different page builders and add-ons and plugins. Although those tools make things easier for people that aren't technically trained to create pages and build websites, the downside is that that semantic HTML is often not there, and yeah, you're not using kind of the right tools for the right jobs at times. So yeah, it's always good to start with the right foundation, have a good developer that knows how to use the semantics, and yeah, they should be able to build you a good website with very little tools in addition to that.
Yeah, that's a great point about page builders. So we've got clients with CreativeHutch who have brought an existing website for us to have a look at, and they've used a page builder. Like if you use WordPress, there's Bakery, Elementor is another one that you might have come across, and visually to look at, the website looks okay, but then when you go and start looking at the code, that's when you can see the issues with what screen readers will see, what web crawlers will see, and that's where the issues start to come in. So like I say, that last point is about, yeah, setting things up properly so that it makes life easier for the machines reading your content and also the people reading your content as well. So yeah, just an interesting addition.
Yeah, and I think Vicky touched on it previously that when it comes to your content, having your content set up in a certain way will help with the semantic HTML. So using your H1 tags for your main heading, that what the page is about, using your H2, H3, even H4 tags for your subheadings under that, use them for hierarchy. And then obviously you've got your body copy, which is kind of the bulk of the text that will be there on the web page. Setting those up properly does the majority of the work for you. And it seems like a really basic thing, but making sure that you have your headings set up and your body copy separate will do a lot of that work.
Absolutely. So moving on to the next section, where do we actually start in terms of website accessibility?
Yeah, so it seems a bit scary to begin with, but it doesn't need to be. So there's a lot of tools out there that we can use to run kind of high level checks on your website, tell you where things might be lacking, and they will also give you suggestions of what you can change that will really help. But another thing that I try to advocate is you don't have to check every single page of your website. So I think a lot of people think that each page of your website is a separate entity and you go through it like you would a book or a magazine, you know, looking at things. But actually, in the way that websites are built, they follow a template. So what you're looking for is to check samples of the content of your website that hold the majority of the copy and the majority of the content. So you might be able to take a single page that has the greatest variety of content on your website, run through that and check that page, and that will give you a really solid basis for what's going on throughout the rest of your website. Because it all follows the same template, if you check the main things, the main types of content, then you've kind of got a good picture overall of what would need to be done. So I would check through those things in terms of an audit, content structure, hierarchy, your colors, your alt tags on your images. Those things can all be checked manually. So you could run, you know, a quick audit with a tool and then run through those things manually, and you've got a really good picture of what needs to be done to ensure that you're compliant. So that would be step one.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we can show a little demo now, Dan.
Yeah, let's do that.
So I tend to, as a starting point, use a tool called Lighthouse, and it's a Google tool. And what it does is look at your website on desktop and on mobile. It looks through your code, your content, your colors, all of those different things, and it gives you a score based on those things and an overall idea of how accessible your website is. But it also gives you the hints as to what you might need to do to improve it. So who can we pick on, Dan, do you think?
So in the chat, Emma has mentioned about Bendrig, which we can have a look at. So what I'll do, I'll just click these buttons for you.
My technical assistant today, Dan.
So it's going to share that tab. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's fine.
Excellent.
Okay. So there we go. Such a lovely colour palette. It's lovely, isn't it? And I love the photography as well. Okay. So what Lighthouse is a it's an extension that is in my Chrome web browser. So you won't be able to see that because I'm sharing the screen, but you will be able to see the results of the audit. So I'm going to click the button and we'll see what happens. So let's have a look. And it should share within this tab, Dan. So
yeah, so if you click that one and then
it's running the report. Here we go.
So is Lighthouse a free tool that people can use?
Lighthouse is a free tool, and you can add it to your web browser. I think it covers most web browsers, and it's the click of, once it's installed in your web browser, it's the click of a button and it will run an audit on your website. So these are our initial results, and a lot of what you see on the page is going to be technical. So it's always good to run it past somebody more technical so that they can give you an idea of what that means. But in terms of our accessibility, I'll look at this tab, you're able to go in and drill down into the design and the content of your website, and it will give you all the information you need to be able to start making those tweaks or put together a plan for those tweaks. So if I just look at, for example, if I go back to accessibility, so here, for example, background and foreground colours do not have sufficient contrast ratio. So as Vicky was saying earlier, there we go. So Vicky's manual check was correct. There's obviously issues here with the buttons in terms of colour contrast. So those could just be a very minor tweak that will change kind of the tone of the pink maybe ever so slightly, and that will all run as compliant. So this will give you a really good list of what needs to be changed in order to get that compliance increase. And again, you can see it's all, the majority of that is pink and white colour contrast. So that could be a lot worse.
So it's exactly like you described before with the website running on a template. If you tweak that pink colour, then you've immediately ticked off a lot of accessibility issues straight away.
Yeah, and because you can change it in one place and it should change it right across the board. So one change could have really maximum impact. And again, as I was saying earlier about kind of names and labels, so semantics I mentioned here, and that just means that when people are using assistive technology, such as a screen reader, the element will have a name. So my example here would be, all that needs to happen is the name of this image should be changed to Bendrig logo, so that when the screen reader's running through the page, it can see, oh, that is where the logo is sitting, and that's what it is, and the screen reader will pick that up. So yeah, and it also shows you what you've passed as well, which is a nice thing, because I always think, you know, you want to know what you're doing well as the things that maybe need a tweak. So it runs through all of the things that are good and that are working well. Lots of green. We like lots of green. And this is making me very happy that there's best practices there. Yeah. So this little tool is so handy, and it just gives you that really top level view of what's happening on the site, and it gives you a really good idea of the things that just need a little tweak, and then that could be all that's needed for your website to be compliant. Now, I know there's a lot of sort of technical language in these, which is why it is good to have somebody take a look at your audit and kind of explain how to make the changes, but also how long that might take. Because we do find that actually the changes that you need to make need to be justifiable in terms of time and cost as well. So, for example, if you have a website that really needs a lot of help, you might find that it would actually work out cheaper and be more efficient to have a new website rather than tackle all of those issues that you have if there's a lot of them. And that is obviously a bigger undertaking than making just a few changes to copy and things like that. So what I would say is step one, audit your website, do it yourself, but also, or a team member or anyone that you have within your organisation, get them to do a bit of a manual check, run a lighthouse report, and it will give you that top level information. That will then allow you to prioritise your fixes within reason. So there might be changes that will take a long time to get into place. So prioritising those fixes is important, and it's important to know how long things will take and how difficult they might be as a starting point. So reach out to those people with the technical knowledge, whether it's a developer or somebody that you have in-house that might be proficient in kind of IT services. We do find that a lot of people can get by with somebody like that, but developers ideally are who we need to be talking to. That means you can then build a long-term plan, which is important, that going forward, you are not only fixing what you might need to fix now, but you're making sure that any new features that come into play are also kind of taken into consideration at that time. So once you've prioritized your changes and you have a better idea of, you know, how you need to be compliant going forward, it's always good to update your content guidelines. I'm sure Dan would advocate for that.
Definitely.
And publish an accessibility statement. So your accessibility statement doesn't need to be something that says, oh, we've done all of these things and we're really accessible, etc. What it can say is, yes, you know that your website might not be up to scratch in certain areas, but there's a plan in place, which you've established in your step 2, to work through that over time and ensure that accessibility is a priority for your organisation. And I think 9 times out of 10, that's enough in terms of kind of a statement of intent to kind of pass that compliance. So I think that's something that people don't generally talk about, is how important that accessibility statement is. But that statement of intent can cover you for a lot of the things that need changed, but will be done over time.
Absolutely.
So once you've written your accessibility statement and made your changes, it's time to test and iterate. So what I would say is, you can't do everything at once, and you can't wait till absolutely everything is complete before you run any tests. I would say test as you go in, change little and often, and you can iterate as you go. It's not one of those things where you have to do it all at once and then it's done and you can forget about it. It's an iterative process. So test and iterate regularly. And then once you've done that, it'll help you stay ahead of future developments to make sure that anything you then introduce after that point is compliant from the beginning, and you don't need to worry about kind of introducing things that you then need to test and iterate because you've already done the work. So exactly that. Yeah, prevention is always better than cure. So if you're doing those things like creating forms instead of PDFs, you're writing good text, you're structuring your content well, you're publishing accessible images and video, which I know that you're going to cover next, Dan. Check that your new features work on assistive technologies, and make sure you have the processes and the software in place for people to be able to make accessibility part of what you do. So rather than it being something that you kind of, it's on your to-do list and it's something that you're forced to do, you can build it into your processes as an organisation, and that will make everything much easier from the get-go. So yeah, those are the steps that I would take. Yeah. And we will put this within the downloads that we'll supply after this as well. So you'll have a bit of a, as part of the checklist, you'll have a good idea of, you know, what the steps would be to help you become more accessible.
Absolutely.
Okay. So as you can imagine, there's a lot of examples that we can show that demonstrate how different organisations from different sectors have made their online tools more accessible. So the first example I would like to show you, and they've been a front runner for a really long time, the BBC, I have to say. The BBC are a great example of an organisation that puts accessibility at the forefront of everything they do. So they have a very robust accessibility statement, which they kind of have to, you know, they're representing Britain. So they've got a great accessibility statement, but they also have an accessibility help website. So the website can kind of guide users in customizing their devices to allow them better access to online services. So they give advice on screen readers, how to set them up, keyboard navigation, how it works, and there's screen reader support and things like that in there. So they're not only providing accessible platforms and tools, they're also giving all the advice needed for you to be able to use other services efficiently as well. So I think they're a good example of championing accessibility across their organisation. So that's always good to see.
Absolutely.
H&M, surprisingly, this one caught me by surprise this year, Dan, because we all love a good online shop, don't we? H&M have been scored consistently across the board as one of the most accessible e-commerce websites. The design's accessible and it's user-friendly for all users from a lot of accounts. It's accessible to people with visual impairments, hear loss, neurological and cognitive limitations, which is kind of a gold standard there. They are very good at showing interactivity. So they're very good at showing what buttons you can click, what links are active, and giving that visual feedback, which I think, you know, sometimes people kind of tend to think of a website as being something kind of like a book or a document, but it's not flat and it does give feedback. And giving that feedback just makes everything more easy to understand and accessible for all people. I think a really good example of that and how that has kind of come into the fore over, I would say, the last 10, 15 years is, you know, the fact that children can pick up a device and they can fully navigate a website and know exactly what to do because they've learned these patterns of, if that's clickable, it changes color. If that's, you know, if that's a section because it's within a box and it's kind of self-contained, and, you know, we learn these patterns over time. But even now, you know how usable websites are by the fact that, you know, a toddler can pick up a device and they can navigate through a website, which, I mean, it's a good thing and a bad thing, isn't it?
Really interesting.
It's two-sided, that one.
It's a great, H&M is a great example as well, where I know often when people think about accessibility, they might immediately think of BBC, where it's black and white text, very clear font, and maybe feel afraid to start using a bit more imagery and branding. And H&M's a really good example of, if you do the technical bits right and you can see the headings along the top and get your alt tags on the images, you can still make it look stylized while still being accessible. Yeah,
it still has their brand feel, and I mean, their logo's red. It's used well. They know how to use it, when to use it, what size to use it, and, you know, it works. In terms of things like the navigation links, you've got this kind of bar across the top, which completely changes shape when you view it on a mobile. Like Vicky was saying earlier about the icons, they're easy to understand. They're very simple. You know, they look really stylish and stylized without needing to do anything too dramatic. So yeah, it kind of ticks the boxes there for that.
Absolutely.
Another one that I think works well and actually shows how you can use different colours and it still be accessible and useful for the majority of people is B&Q. So B&Q specifically collaborated with the RNIB to ensure that the accessibility measures they put in place kind of have a greater impact for people with, you know, visual impairments. They also continue to do usability testing and restructure their content in ways that make it more accessible to the majority of users. They stay up to date with regulations, which is important, and you can read that in their accessibility statement. And they just use really clear navigation, really good levels of contrast, and that little pop of colour just makes all the difference to them. And it's their orange, and you recognise it, which, you know, consistency is key. I'm sure Vicky will tell everyone.
And it's interesting with how you mentioned before, Vicky, about authenticity, and B&Q, like with their hiring practices, like they're famous for giving opportunities to more people that might not have had those opportunities. So they're really authentic in their accessibility and making sure people can access their services, and even down to the hiring practices and the website. It's all part of that brand look and feel that you'd immediately think of when you see B&Q.
And something that they do really well is they use real person, human testing on everything, usability testing. So rather than kind of just using technology to give them suggestions of what's needed, they will get focus groups and they do usability testing, proper usability testing with real world feedback, which is the ideal scenario. I wish we all had time to do all of that. But, you know, the likelihood is that the majority of people won't have, you know, either the access or the time to be able to do that kind of testing. So B&Q really do put themselves out there and make the effort.
Absolutely.
And another one that I think is really important to mention is Sainsbury's. So Sainsbury's really are pushing their online kind of click and collect service. And I think it's been a really good thing because it's made their supermarket more accessible to more people. And alongside the side of that, they've obviously had to adjust the website, especially for screen readers and keyboard navigation, as well as adjustable text sizes. So they will allow you to zoom into their website as far as 400% without it breaking the layout, which is the sign of a really good build, a really good website build. So it just means that, you know, for the likes of, I have to say, my mum is one of those people. She has to have everything really zoomed in, otherwise she can't see it. So she uses Sainsbury's a lot of the time for that reason. So if she's ordering online using her mobile, or even on a desktop, you can zoom in to a really high level without the layout breaking. You can still see everything you need to do, and they really take care of their accessibility and inclusivity as well. So they're a really good example. And, you know, when you think of people that might not be able to get out to a supermarket, or, you know, if you need your food shop and you can't get to the shop and you're at home, if you then can't order online and you have nobody that will assist you with that, it's so important. So important.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's interesting, well, reading up about the stats and brand loyalty, well, that's a great example, isn't it? Where straight away online shopping immediately go to Sainsbury's and Tesco and Asda, and we'll get to Tesco shortly, but alternatives, they won't even come into mind, because, you know, Sainsbury's is catering to you, it's looking after you, so you can be loyal to them, regardless if, like, if the prices go up or if they don't have things in stock, like, you're still going to be loyal. So
that's what I was going to say, regardless of the prices, Dan, because the prices at Sainsbury's are shocking.
But yeah, great example.
Okay, so that leads us on to kind of my gold star of the day goes to Tesco in terms of accessibility. So Tesco is one of the front runners when it comes to accessibility. They have screen reader help, so they let people use the website in whatever way they need to. It's very flexible. They have easy to use menus that help people find things quickly, which you know how important it is, especially if you get in a big shop. People don't want to have to kind of look through reams and reams of content to find what they need. They also use simple language, which is really important so that everyone can understand the site. And they got a lot of help from, again, the RNIB in terms of, you know, visuals and, you know, all the tools that might be required to access the content. So they've done a really, really good job, and they are also reaping the benefits. So they've seen that their online sales went up by 350%, which, I mean, for anyone's sales to go up by 350% it's astronomical, isn't it? But it just shows that if people are happy with the website, if it's working really well for them and it's doing all the things that they need it to do to allow them to access the content and place their orders, then you get that brand loyalty, that customer loyalty, and the happier your customers are, the happier your sales team will be.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but I mean, it's not just about that. It's about the moral implications as well, and the ethical complications that come with, you know, having, you know, providing a service. And it's just so important to make sure that we're not kind of disregarding any demographic in terms of, you know, the products and the services that we're pushing out online. And yeah, Tesco have done a really, really good job. Pleased with that one. So my final points and takeaways would be that make sure your website meets at least the WCAG 2.1 AA standard as a minimum. Now, I know that seems, it's not very user-friendly in itself, that, is it? But there's guidance online. Again, the things that we've been through today should make sure that you meet those standards. That also applies to mobile apps. Again, mobile apps are becoming more and more important, used by more and more people. So ensuring your mobile apps are also to that standard, especially if you are providing booking services or purchasing processes, everything from your homepage to a basket or a checkout or downloads, anything like that. Try to make them as accessible as possible using the guides that we've kind of given you today. And it's good to see people using Lighthouse and giving it a good go. I'm pleased it's handy for people. It's definitely my go-to as a high level kind of first point. So
yeah, good to see lots of green.
Yeah.
Super. Well, thank you very much for that, Nick. So we're on to the last section of the day. Has anyone got any questions before we move on around website accessibility? Any questions for Nick? If you just want to pop your hand up or pop anything in the chat, we can answer those before we move on. No questions? No problem. Well, if you do think of any questions, just pop them in the chat and Nick can respond directly. So section 3 is all about accessible content creation. So we've got a lot of marketers with us today, so we'll know all about social media and email marketing and all that nice stuff. So what I want to do is just give a high-level overview. To go into depth is probably going to take a little bit too long, but it's just about the considerations that you need to think of. So we've chatted so far about your colours and your branding and your website, but this goes into the other marketing channels that we need to consider. So in terms of the things to consider, looking at the captions that you use on social media and your use of emojis. So for example, for a screen reader, if someone is browsing social media and your social media post starts with, for example, like 3 rocket emojis, if you've been using ChatGPT, the screen reader will read it as rocket emoji, rocket emoji, rocket emoji, and then start reading the content. So best practice top tip is to write your caption and then use just one emoji at the end if you are so inclined. But that's just something to be aware of when you put together your social posts. In addition, there is alt tags on images. So I know LinkedIn and Facebook and Instagram allow you to put alt tags. So that's great for people with screen readers. It's great for SEO benefits as well. Like I mentioned before, there was a client we had that was ranking and generating sales through Google through their image alt tags, which is just a fantastic example. Really, anytime you use an image online, whether that's in your email marketing, on your website, on socials, it should always have a descriptive alt tag and include keywords if you want extra brownie points. In addition, there's also paragraph styles. So you may have come across this if you've been using Microsoft Word, how when you open your document, you can set something as a title or as body text, and it immediately sets it to big text, or it allows you to create a table of contents. So that's really important to use to make your document accessible. And that's similar for email marketing too. So you want to start your email with, if you want to have a header image, and then you want to have a H1, and then list your content exactly how you described before, Nick, about in semantic style. So making sure things are in order. You've got your heading followed by body and then a button. And if you want to use H2s, they should always appear after H1. But it's all these considerations where instead of highlighting something and making it bold, by selecting it as a heading style, it just gives much better visibility for people using a screen reader. Yeah, just overall, much better way to do it. So moving on in terms of the benefits on social media, in addition to how I was chatting about your caption writing and your images, if you're producing videos, it's really useful to have your captions at the bottom. So in addition to people that have audio impairments, it's also great for people that are scrolling on the phone and they don't want the music blaring out to the partner, so they're reading it with the captions on. So it's not just people with additional needs, it's so that everyone can access your content. So that's another great point about videos on social. Yeah, in terms of your website, which we've chatted on before, your email marketing, using paragraph styles and tagging things as H1 and H2 is a great, quick and easy win. And just remember those alt tags because it's so, so important. So as well as the accessibility benefits, you also gain SEO benefits too, whether that's on social media, ranking on an image search, or on your website as well. So Mia's got a great question about H1 for scheduled posts. So the way that social media works is that it doesn't allow you to tag your caption as a H1. So for example, if you're on Facebook, Facebook itself will have its own H1s and then you'll appear as body copy. So on social media posts, the main thing to consider is your alt tags and also on your video, the captions as well. There's no way to tag, unless you know anything more about that, Nick. Your actual captions will always appear as Facebook wants it to. So email marketing and website is where you can use your H1 and H2s. Okay, so this point I want to pick on someone in the room. This is the Flesch Kincaid calculator, which is a horrible name, but it's an absolutely fantastic tool. So what this does is it looks at your copywriting, whether that's on your website, on social media. If you're writing a press release, for example, you want to try and tone it to the widest audience possible. So for the majority of businesses here, if you're open to the general public, you want to aim it at secondary school level. And a tool like this allows you to analyze your sentence length, complicated words, and looks for you to simplify things. So as well as it being accessible to a wider audience, it means that, like I mentioned before, your marketing communications are going to be understood by a wider group of people.
So can I just ask a question there, Dan?
Yeah, of course.
So I know that a lot of people nowadays are using things like ChatGPT to produce copy.
Yeah.
is one of the issues with that it won't be followed by this kind of
exactly
technique.
that. So I've used ChatGPT myself, and for example, like for doing a first draft of a press release, if we want to have a basis to work on, it's a great tool. So once it drafts a press release, I'll put it into a tool like this, and it'll flag where the issues are. And that's when the human touch comes in. So you could ask ChatGPT to edit the reading age of the article that you've produced, for example, but then it'll go far too much in the other direction. I know if people have used ChatGPT and it's done an answer that sounds really technical, and you say, can you make it sound more friendly? And then it'll go right the other end of the spectrum. It'll be like, hey guys, check out this new technical thing, and lots of emojis. So that's when the human touch comes in. So with ChatGPT, it's a great starting point. But then if you use tools like this one we're about to show, and it's actually reading it through and thinking to yourself, right, that could be 2 sentences instead of 1, or I could swap that for a different word that's understood by more people. That's a great way to do it, if that answers your question.
It does. And I think as well, in terms of kind of the things that Vicky was touching on earlier, in terms of kind of your brand voice is important as well. So I suppose using a tool like this, you can still sort of tailor it to sound like your brand while meeting these standards as well, which would be a good balance to achieve.
Exactly that. And that's where marketers like having the room. That's where we earn our money. It's the knowing at what level to gauge using technology and the human touch and all the considerations that you need to think about. So for this next section, before we move on, is anyone brave enough to have some of their copy audited, whether that's on their social media or the website, and we can pop it through this tool. And just before we do that, Vicky, I see you've got your hand up.
Didn't want to interrupt. Yeah, I just wanted to kind of talk about that a little bit further while someone's putting up the courage to volunteer here. That's why we've got the foundations we were talking about earlier. Once you get the foundations of what your message is and your vision, then you know what to prompt in ChatGPT, because I think, like you're saying, it's a great starter tool, but you kind of have to go one step before that to understand what the message is, what you're trying to say, and make sure that's consistent. Then you can put it into Chatty, as I like to call it, but then prompt it, and then you can put it in this tool. So there's that step beforehand that you need to know your brand really well first before you do that. Otherwise, you'll sound like lots of other brands, like you say, or you'll have lots of rocket emojis and jazz hands, and you won't get that brand recognition because you won't be unique or authentic. So I just wanted to say that.
That's brilliant. So thank you very much to the Health Collective for putting in forward that we will do that now. I think it's Emma we've got on the call. It doesn't come up with your name. So if I share my screen, we'll have a look at the website here in question. So I'll share my screen. Brilliant. Thanks, Emma. So we've got here one of your website pages. So looking at the clinic space. So I've got a tool here, which is a free tool. There's loads of alternatives online, and we'll send a few links. But as long as you type that into Google, then you'll get a tool. So often there's like word limits. So it's just finding the best one that works for you. So what we'll do is we'll look at where you've got a bit more copy. So for example, this one here. And then we'll just paste it into the calculator. And then we'll also paste this one too. So you can do this if you're about to do a social media post. Like I mentioned before, if you're writing a press release, it's just a really useful way to flag up areas that you could improve on. So we've got a nice bit of content there. So it's come up with the results here, and you can see the reading grade level, how easy it is to read, flags areas fairly difficult, which we'll go into shortly. Average words per sentence, so the shorter the sentence is, the easier it is to understand. Average syllables per word. Again, if you're using lots of complex words with lots of syllables, that's harder to read, whether you've got additional needs or not. So looking here, we've got the different reading levels. So 10th to 12th grade is pretty decent, especially if you've got like a complicated product. So especially like we think about the nuclear companies in West Cumbria, that they'll be speaking to like people with PhDs in nuclear science, and that's the type of level that would be okay for them. But I think for this space here, we could probably improve the writing. So if we look back here at the copy, so we've got situated in the centre of the historic market town of Wigton, Cumbria, we could probably knock that off. The Health Collective has rooms to lease for independent healthcare professionals and wellbeing practitioners. So Emma, you'll be the expert, but if there's an easier way to write that, that's quite a lot of syllables. So for example, just for now, to see the difference, we'll knock that off. Great transport links, plenty of parking and amazing facilities. We'll turn that into one sentence. All of our, again, rooms come fully serviced and include all rates. Utilities, Wi-Fi, furnishing, and cleaning consumables. That's again quite a lot of syllables. So just for fun now, again, this is something that you spend a lot more time actually reviewing the copy. All practitioners will be included in our clinical ad, marketing and social media. And then we'll get rid of this just for the benefit of time. So you can see with those small changes, by reducing the sentence length, we've got the reading level slightly better, we've got it slightly easier to read. It's still 10th to 12th grade, so we could do with potentially the slightly longer words replacing them. So looking down, we've slightly improved it, but it's something that, again, it's an ongoing thing. And using the human touch, if you've optimized it as well as you can, and it's still at a reading age of 10th to 12th grade, then just go with that. So you've put the effort into simplify the sentences, reduce the syllables, so that's going to increase the readability and improve your SEO as well. So apologies, that's quite a quick run through, but you can do that for your own copy as well. Okay.
Can I ask a question, Dan?
Yeah, of course.
So just thinking here, when you've done it, like the Health Collective, that's a lovely name. It's a long name, but and then could we put to bring in that conversational thing of you and me, because you always want to bring the audience in to say, you know, this is for you, we can do this for you, etc. Would we put we, so we could put we have rooms to lease, or from an SEO point of view, is that not great? Would you still want to have the business name there? Does that make sense?
So from an SEO perspective, the thing is as well, you don't want to mention the business name too much anyway. So
Right.
if you think you've got a whole page, you don't want to kind of cram the business name in just for SEO purposes. It'll come naturally anyway. So I think it's more important for it to be of that tone and more personalized and warmer than it is to get the name in. And I think, again, with your SEO, Google also picks up on like relevance. So relevance and tone will come into it. So the tone is probably, in this case, more important than putting the name in there.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Thank you.
Brilliant. And you can spend all day tweaking it and seeing it go up and down. So I'll stop sharing this one. And we will resume our presentation. So just before we move on, has anyone got any questions around social media or email marketing or PR and press releases, kind of any other marketing channels that you're curious about accessibility on that we can help with? Again, we'll include all of the links in our extra documents so you can take it away. But yeah, has anyone got any questions now? No, that's absolutely fine. Well, what I'll do, I'll share.
He's typing.
Real. In what context, Mia? I think Vicky might be best placed to answer, but it'd be curious to perhaps if we have a chat after the call, that would be a good shout.
Mm-hmm. Yes, yeah, we do. We work on a lot of that type of social, but not just kind of accessibility, but the community. We do a lot of environmental sustainability stuff, but we work internally as well. So, you know, it's all about the culture and how it can spread across that way. So give me a shout, Mia, and we can have a quick call and chat through that. That helps.
Brilliant. That sounds great. So action plan and next steps. We are going to send across an accessibility checklist. So including some of your comments in the chat today, I want to make sure that it really applies to you guys. So we're going to be sending that across this week. And we've got some key actions for you to take away today. So rounding up a little bit about what we've chatted about, if there's 5 key actions that you want to take away, the first one is, now that you're aware about accessibility and the scale of the challenge and the business benefits, as well as the moral and ethical benefits, you need to be a champion within your business. And if you're, like, for example, creating a new website, it needs to be bedded in right from the start. So you need to be champions within your businesses to explain about accessibility. The next step is based on Vicky's comments around assessing your colours, using the colour contrast tool, deciding on your fonts, and all in terms of your branding. Before changing anything, just audit to see where you're at and maybe have a bit of a play with the colour contrasts to see if you need to tweak your brand colours slightly. Our third step is based on what you chatted about, Nick. So auditing your website with Lighthouse and seeing what small tweaks you can make that can really make a boost to your accessibility and your SEO. Number 4 is about my section. So when you're posting on socials, when you're doing anything online or in print, just being mindful about your tone of voice and your copy, using short sentences, using alt tags everywhere you can. Definitely use your alt tags. And number 5 is start planning for your journey of fixes. So appreciating that this could be a bit of a long-term fix. It's not overnight. There's things that you need to do, and a lot of it, especially in larger organizations, is about changing the culture. So understanding that it's a long-term process and just keeping up the momentum and starting work and not feeling overwhelmed by everything at once. Is there any key actions that you'd add to that, Nick and Vicky, or has that kind of covered what you would urge people to take away?
Yeah, I think from top level stuff, I think they're good key points. That's quite a lot for everyone to digest.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, the only other thing that I would say is, you know, you don't have to take it all on yourself. You know, talk to other people about it, talk to other organizations about how they've handled it. I think the conversation is as important as the fixes. So talk to the right people.
That's a great shout. So we've reached the end. We're a little bit early, but nothing wrong with that. So we're offering a free accessibility consultation only for people that are on this call. So it's exclusive for now, where you'll be able to chat to either me or Nick or Vicky about the area in question. If you want to go through your branding, we can have a quick call. We'll also give you the tools which you can use to have a go yourself and see what information you find. But we'd urge you to pop us an email at CreativeHutch and we'd be delighted to help. And then just before we go, I'm going to pop a link in the chat for leaving us a Google review. It's one of my first courses, so be kind, but any reviews are really appreciated. And yeah, as well as sharing knowledge, it's great to have reviews. So I'll pop that link in the chat. If anyone's got any questions, just pop it in the chat. I'll stop sharing my screen so I can share that link and we can see each other face to face. And yeah, just just before we go, just a huge thank you for engaging and being brave to have your websites audited. Yeah, it's been absolutely wonderful speaking to everyone today.
Yeah, thanks team. It's been really useful. I think a lot of people will benefit from this today, and we will send a follow-up email, won't we, and with all the useful links that you've highlighted today.
Good. Yeah, thank you. We're getting some great comments. It's just great that so many people are on it. I think that means that it's definitely something that people are becoming more aware of and understanding the impact it has. So that's really positive, I think.
It is. I was talking to Dan earlier, and I was saying how, you know, even from my perspective, I'm neurodiverse. So all of these things today, you know, even the impact that they have on me and my ADHD, which I'm happy sharing, trying to be kind of more open about having the discussions with people about things like services and tools and branding and how important it is, and how you can sort of feel if you have, you know, whether you're neurodiverse or you have, you know, any other additional needs. I think even just being heard is important. So being, you know, putting out there on your website or your, you know, anything else about how, you know, that you're actually tackling sort of the accessibility issue goes a long way. I think just being open to having that discussion and, you know, putting it out there that you are considering it, I think means a lot to a lot of people.
Absolutely. And I've just reading some of the messages in the chat there. Very kind, thank you. And make sure you put it on Google so everyone else knows.
Ever the marketer, Dan. Yeah, thank you everyone for your time.
Brilliant. Thanks, everybody. Has anyone got any final questions before we wrap up for lunch? I think you've pretty much covered everything. Yeah.
Rick's writing something, but I think that's it.
Brilliant.
You're very welcome. Always a pleasure.
Thanks very much, Lucy.
You're very welcome. Thanks for coming along today, guys. And thanks, CreativeHutch team, as always.